British tourist fights for life after rock collapse horror at Greece Nydri Waterfall. A British woman, aged 50, in a critical condition, in hospital after being struck by a falling rock at the popular Nydri Waterfalls in Lefkada, Greece, in a shocking accident that has left tourists and authorities alarmed. Now let's dive deep and explore every hidden detail behind this story on our AI
Picture this,
podcast.
right? You are on like the perfect European summer holiday.
Oh, the absolute dream vacation.
Exactly. You've got the warm Mediterranean sun on your shoulders. You are surrounded by these just ancient, dramatic cliffs. The water is that impossible shade of turquoise.
Yeah, the postcard view.
Right. And you're just trying to take it all in, maybe, get the perfect photo. Everything feels completely idyllic. And then without literally any warning, the very landscape around you just gives way.
It's horrifying.
In a fraction of a second, the backdrop of your perfect vacation becomes an absolute nightmare.
It is, it's just a terrifying juxtaposition to try and wrap your mind around because, well, we're incredibly conditioned as a species to see massive geological formations, cliffs, canyons, rock arches. We see them as permanent fixtures.
Right, like they've always been there and always will be.
Exactly. Because our human lifespans are so short, we measure stability in, decades? So we look at a giant stone arch and we just treat it like a static monument built solely for our enjoyment. We completely forget that we are stepping into an active, constantly degrading, and honestly highly volatile environment.
And when that illusion of prominence shatters, the results are catastrophic. Today, we are diving into a stack of deeply sobering materials collectively titled Perilous Peaks, European Landmark Safety Crisis.
It's a heavy read for sure.
It really is. Our mission with this deep dive is to unpack two recent, devastating accidents that occurred at highly popular natural tourist hotspots in Europe. We're going to break down the science and the circumstances to really understand the sudden, volatile nature of the environments we so often just treat as mere backdrops for our vacations.
Yeah, and to be clear from the outset, the goal today isn't just to recount the details of these tragedies, as crucial as it is to acknowledge the human cost.
Absolutely.
We really need to synthesize these events to understand a much broader, growing concern regarding visitor safety. What we are analyzing here is the severe friction between the booming industry of mass tourism and the fragile, degrading reality of natural landmarks.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with an incident that perfectly highlights just how unpredictable these environments really are, even when everything looks completely serene.
Right.
We are heading to Greece, specifically the Nydri Waterfalls on the island of Lefkada. Have you seen pictures of this place?
I have. It's stunning.
It looks like something straight out of a fantasy movie.
Undeniably. I mean, you have this lush canyon landscape, dense green foliage all around, and the centerpiece is this really striking 39-foot tall waterfall.
Yeah.
It is consistently ranked as one of Greece's most visited natural attractions. It's pulling in thousands of summer visitors every single year.
But the journey to get to that waterfall feels kind of like a siren song.
How so?
Well, it's incredibly beautiful, and it just draws you in, right?
Yeah.
Pulling you further up the gorge. But the access path itself is treacherous.
Right.
It is really narrow, it's heavily uneven, and it demands, actual physical exertion to navigate. Which brings up a critical question. Are tourists simply lulled into a false sense of security by the sheer beauty of a site like this?
Mm-hmm.
Do we get so mesmerized by the scenery that we forget we're actually navigating a wild, steep gorge?
That is a well-documented psychological phenomenon in the tourism industry, actually. It's often referred to as a collapse of threat assessment.
Collapse of threat assessment. Wow.
Yeah, so when you enter an environment that is visually stunning, and particularly when that space is crowded with, hundreds of other people smiling, taking selfies, having a good time.
Everyone seems fine, so you think you're fine.
Exactly. Your brain essentially just turns off its natural alarm system. Social proof kicks in. We subconsciously assume that if thousands of people come here every day, the area has been somehow sanitized, stabilized, and engineered for our protection.
Which is so not the case in nature. I mean, if you've ever walked a gorge trail, you probably assume the rocks towering above you
Yes.
are set in stone, pun intended.
Right.
But structurally, they're often just held in place by friction and packed dirt. You have to consider the mechanics of a canyon. It was carved by water, cutting through bedrock over millennia.
Yes.
That means the walls are sheer. And the constant mist from a 39-foot waterfall keeps the rock faces damp, slowly dissolving the minerals that bind the stone together. Those rocks are literally just waiting for a slight shift in temperature or a little bit of wind to finally let go.
And unfortunately, that silent, invisible degradation culminated in a sudden tragedy at Nydri. Out of nowhere, high above the tourist path, a fragment of rock broke loose from the canyon wall and plummeted directly into the crowd.
Oh man, and it struck a 50-year-old British woman directly in the head.
It did. A completely unpredictable detachment. And, given the velocity of a rock falling from that height, the impact caused severe critical head injuries instantly.
And dealing with a trauma emergency is difficult, literally anywhere. But the logistics of executing a rescue in a place like the Nydri Gorge are just a nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
Emergency services and local firefighters had to physically navigate that rugged, remote, slippery terrain, carrying all their heavy medical gear just to reach her.
Just consider the physical toll of that environment, right? You mentioned earlier the access path is narrow and demanding for a healthy, uninjured tourist just walking on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, totally.
Now introduce the mechanics of a rescue operation. First responders are trying to stabilize a critical head injury and transport a human body over slick boulders and uneven elevation without causing further trauma.
The sensory details from the scene and the reports are just harrowing. She had to be carefully strapped into a rigid orange rescue stretcher to keep her spine aligned.
Right.
But her condition was deteriorating so rapidly on the scene that medical teams couldn't even risk moving her immediately. They actually had to perform a delicate medical procedure to place her on a breathing tube right there on the rocks. Yeah, surrounded by the canyon walls before they could even begin the agonizing extraction. She was eventually transferred urgently to a local hospital for emergency surgery and is expected to be moved to a specialized trauma center in Athens for advanced neurosurgical treatment.
And, the rockfall also created an immediate ripple effect of chaos in the gorge.
Because of the debris.
Exactly. When that initial fragment detached, it sent smaller rocks and debris scattering down the steep canyon walls. Several other tourists at the site sustained minor injuries from the shrapnel.
I can't even imagine.
Just think about the sheer panic of being trapped in an enclosed, narrow space, hearing a crack above you, and watching the walls literally start raining rock down on a crowded path.
So what does this all mean? How does a life-altering event like this just randomly happen at a major managed tourist site?
Well, that is the central question local authorities are currently scrambling to answer. The official investigation is really trying to determine the exact nature of the failure. Was this rockfall purely the result of natural, unpreventable geological erosion, an act of nature that no one could have predicted? Or were there visible signs of instability?
Did they miss something?
Precisely. Were safety warnings at the site ignored, either by the tourists venturing off the path or by the entities managing the site's upkeep?
It's investigating that terrifying gray area between completely natural decay and human negligence.
And that ambiguity between natural geological processes and human action serves as the perfect lens to examine the second major incident in this stack of reports.
Yeah, they are so linked.
Because if the sudden rockfall in Greece highlights the terrifying unpredictability of a landscape slowly eroding on its own, this next tragedy forces us to look at the violent chain reaction that occurs when direct human interaction meets a highly fragile geological structure.
And this second event is incredibly complex and just deeply tragic. Wow. We're shifting focus now from the lush inland canyons of Greece to the coastal island of Comino in Malta. There was a very famous, highly photographed rock arch formation there, known as the Kissing Elephants.
Coastal rock arches are fascinating, temporary anomalies, really. They are formed over thousands of years by unrelenting wave action.
Just constant battering from the sea.
Exactly. The ocean constantly undercuts a protruding limestone cliff, essentially hollowing out the base until a hole punches all the way through, leaving a bridge of rock suspended over the water.
Wow.
By definition, they are cantilevered structures, completely defying gravity, and they are incredibly popular spots for boaters, jet skiers, and cliff divers.
So we need to look closely at the exact timeline on that Saturday evening. It's around 7 p.m. The Mediterranean sun is setting. The area is busy with people getting their last rides in on the water, soaking up the scenery.
Classic summer evening.
Yeah. And suddenly, this massive ancient rock arch completely shears apart and collapses directly into the sea.
The fallout below the arch was immediate. A 26-year-old Chinese man was riding a jet ski directly underneath the structure at the exact moment it failed.
Oh my God.
The sheer volume of falling limestone displaced a massive amount of water. He was tragically pinned beneath the rock, crushed against the seabed, and killed.
It is just an unthinkable scenario.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one caught in the impact zone, right?
No, he wasn't.
A 27-year-old Chinese woman was riding as a passenger on that very same jet ski. She miraculously survived the collapse, but sustained serious injuries from the falling debris and the force of the water.
Yeah.
She was rushed to Gozo General Hospital, and thankfully doctors confirmed her injuries are not life-threatening. But the physical trauma, combined with just the emotional horror of surviving a collapse of that magnitude, it is difficult to even comprehend.
It really forces you to respect the sheer kinetic violence of a geological collapse.
Definitely.
We are talking about hundreds of tons of rock plummeting in a fraction of a second, crushing heavy marine machinery like tin cans. It is a violent, explosive event.
And looking at the exact catalyst for this collapse, here's where it gets really interesting from a forensic perspective.
Yep.
Even if the outcome was horrific, a highly specific sequence of events unfolded just seconds before the disaster. Reports show the arch failed almost immediately after a 32-year-old American tourist climbed to the top and jumped off the structure into the sea below.
The timing of the jump and the subsequent failure of the arch is, frankly, impossible for investigators to ignore.
We have to break down the mechanics here, because I think a lot of people might wonder how one person jumping could bring down a massive cliff.
It sounds impossible at first.
Right. But think of limestone, not like a solid block of granite, but more like a rigid sponge. It looks tough on the outside, but it is highly porous.
Exactly.
For centuries, salt from the sea spray has been getting inside the pores of the rock, crystallizing and expanding, literally blasting the internal bonds of the stone apart at a microscopic level. It's a process called salt weathering.
Yes.
So the rock isn't just getting thinner. The stone itself is fundamentally fatiguing. Is this a situation where the ocean has been loading microscopic straws of damage onto this arch for centuries, and this tourist jumping off was just the final 180-pound piece of straw that broke the camel's back?
The camel's back analogy is scientifically spot on. In structural geology, this is the definition of reaching a critical threshold or a tipping point.
Okay.
The kissing elephant's arch was in a constant, agonizing state of structural stress. Gravity is relentlessly pulling the center of the span downward, while the ocean continuously erodes the supportive pillars at the base.
So it's being pulled in two bad directions.
Exactly. The limestone was profoundly fatigued. When a human being leaps from the top of that arch, they aren't just adding static weight, they are exerting a dynamic, kinetic downward force as their legs push off against the stone.
Right, because force equals mass times acceleration. It's an impact.
Precisely. It is an explosive exertion of energy on a cantilevered structure that is already hovering at its absolute failure limit. Compared to the massive weight of the arch itself, yeah, a human jumping seems mathematically insignificant. But when a structure's internal shear strength is fatigued to the breaking point, that sudden kinetic trigger is all it takes to cause the stone to finally snap and give way.
And the stark contrast and how the aftermath played out for the different people involved really highlights the chaos of the moment. The 32-year-old American tourist who jumped actually survived the collapse.
He did.
He was pulled from the chaotic water by a passing boat. He received medical treatment at nearby Magar Harbor, but didn't even require hospitalization for his injuries.
While simultaneously, beneath the turbulent surface of the water, a catastrophic recovery operation was just beginning.
Exactly. The scale of that recovery operation for the deceased 26-year-old was immense. Because of the sheer size of the collapsed boulders, Malta's Civil Protection Department couldn't just send divers down immediately.
It was too dangerous, too massive.
Right. They actually had to deploy heavy industrial equipment and machinery to the site just to clear away the massive submerged rocks. It wasn't until Sunday evening, a full 24 hours later, that Army divers could finally navigate the wreckage and recover the young man's body from the ocean floor.
Such a tragedy.
The juxtaposition is haunting. One person gets pulled onto a boat with minor injuries, while heavy machinery has to be barged in to recover someone else pinned to the seabed.
And naturally, the legal and investigative machinery is now operating in high gear. A Maltese magistrate has launched an official, comprehensive inquiry into the incident to establish the factual chain of events.
But what exactly is a forensic inquiry like that going to focus on? I mean, how do you investigate a rock?
What's fascinating here is the sheer complexity of the scientific mandate. The inquiry has to forensically disentangle the two competing forces we just broke down.
Okay.
They must weigh the natural, historical, and inevitable progress of coastal erosion against the acute physical impact of the human jumping off the structure.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. The investigators have to answer a really difficult legal question. Can they definitively prove that the kinetic downward force of the jump was the acute trigger that caused the collapse?
Right.
Or was the structural failure imminent regardless, and the timing of the jump was merely a tragic, horrific coincidence? Drawing a definitive legal line in an environment that is naturally designed by the Earth to decay is a monumental challenge.
So, zooming out to look at the entire perilous peak stack, we're looking at two wildly different locations. We have a lush, enclosed waterfall gorge in mainland Greece and an exposed coastal rock arch in the Mediterranean Sea in Malta.
Different worlds visually.
Totally. Yet they share this underlying terrifying DNA.
Yeah.
Both are world-famous, highly sought-after natural attractions. Both use their stunning beauty to draw thousands of visitors who want to stand as close to the dramatic geology as possible.
And it is absolutely crucial in this analysis to maintain strict impartiality regarding where the blame lies. The sources we are examining, they do not exist to point fingers at local government safety policies, nor are they here to condemn tourists for seeking out beautiful places. The facts simply present us with an inherent, undeniable friction. You have incredibly fragile, silently eroding natural landmarks, and you are introducing a massive, relentless volume of human presence into those spaces. When you combine those two elements, catastrophic friction is inevitable.
I think that's exactly why this deep dive matters to you, the person listening right now.
Absolutely.
If you are planning a trip to a famous natural landmark, whether you're hiking into a canyon, swimming under a waterfall, or boating near a coastal arch, these incidents are a stark, unignorable reminder that scenic does not mean tame.
That's a great way to put it. We constantly conflate aesthetic beauty with structural safety.
We do it without even thinking.
Yeah.
We scroll through social media, we see a postcard perfect view, and we book the ticket. We completely forget that the physical demands of actually getting there, like navigating that uneven, slippery, narrow path in the Greek gorge, are intensely real. We forget that the structural realities of the Earth, like the invisibly fatiguing limestone arch in Malta, do not care that we are on vacation.
They really don't.
Being in these environments requires a high level of active, continuous situational awareness. And frankly, that is a mindset we intentionally leave at home when we go on holiday to relax.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these twin tragedies, occurring just days apart across the European continent, are highlighting a rapidly growing concern on a global scale.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
We are currently experiencing an unprecedented boom in global tourism, specifically directed toward natural sites that go viral on social media.
Right, the algorithm sends everyone to the same spot.
Exactly. Algorithms are funneling thousands of people to the exact same precarious spots, but those environments are constantly quietly falling apart. The physical infrastructure of our planet is not a theme park built to municipal safety codes. It is a wild, dynamic, and uncaring system.
Very true.
As more and more people flock to these fragile, degrading edges of the map, the statistical probability of these devastating interactions is only going to increase.
It's an intense reality check. To summarize the crucial takeaways we've unpacked today from the reports first, we examined the devastating, random unpredictability of the Nydri Waterfalls rockfall in Greece, exploring how invisible natural erosion, or perhaps a failure to heed environmental warnings, can shatter a peaceful landscape and lead to critical injuries.
Right.
Second, we broke down the highly complex, tragic collapse of the Kissing Elephant's Arch in Malta, detailing how the fragile nature of fatiguing limestone and the sudden impact of human activity intersected to cause a massive, fatal collapse.
It truly forces us to reevaluate our underlying relationship with the natural world. I will leave you with this final thought to mull over. When we stand at the base of a towering mountain, hike through a deep gorge, or gaze at a sweeping stone arch, our human perspective defaults to seeing permanence.
Yeah, we see things as fixed.
We see unyielding stability. But in the vast, slow span of geological time, these structures are constantly moving, weakening, crumbling, and falling apart. What we witnessed this week at these two sites was just a single violent second of geological time violently intersecting with human lives.
Wow.
Perhaps the real danger isn't just the failing rock itself, but our own stubborn illusion that nature stands perfectly still just so we can come and visit it.
That is a deeply powerful thought to end on. The next time you're standing in front of that perfect postcard view, taking it all in, take just one extra moment to look a little closer at what you're really standing on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious out there, keep your eyes open, and above all, stay safe on your own adventures. Catch you next time.
Okay, one question for you. What safety measures should be made mandatory at popular natural tourist sites like Nydri Waterfalls and the Kissing Elephants Arch to prevent such sudden and deadly rockfall tragedies? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.